Oh, that's what it was. He was talking about that if you don't have hierarchy, everything is just a power struggle. And I think it's in the paragraph right above the one with Shakespeare. Yes, it is. I wish I could tell you what page, but I'm on my Kindle.
So Aristotle was thinking mainly of civil society. Is it that one?
It is where he goes into the greatest statement of the hierarchical conception in its double reference to civil and cosmic life is perhaps the speech of Ulysses in Shakespeare's
Troilus.
Troilus. Yeah, its special importance lies in the clear statement of the alternative to hierarchy. That's what it was. So it's funny, as I wasn't feeling the best last night, so most of my reading I did this morning, but I played the audio book last night, or the audio version of this on your phone. Have you heard about the 2-swipe on your, you know how to do this? So Kindle, if you have a regular Kindle, it'll read to you, right?
Oh, no, I didn't know this.
So the old Kindles actually have the built-in reader where you can play back. It'll read, you have if you buy the Kindle, not the Kindle tablets is what I'm thinking of. So the Kindle tablets will read to you. So you have the Kindle tablets and then you have the Kindle books. The Kindle tablets inside the Kindle app, you can it'll just read the book to you. And so I didn't know those existed on the phone. Well, they don't, but your Apple phone has the ability for, I think it's like speak on screen or something like that.
Okay.
You double swipe down with 2 fingers. You just swipe down with 2 fingers and
it'll read the screen to you?
Yeah, it'll read the screen to you. Whatever screen you have on there.
Apple's brilliant.
Yeah. So I love them. Thank you, Apple. And so I was reading this that way from my iPad. So you can do it from your iPad, or you can do it from your Kindle, or it was iPad, Kindle app. And they'll just turn the page too. So you just keep reading, they'll turn the page and keep reading before you turn the page. So that's how, and then they got some great voices on there. I almost want you to hear just how good the voice is on it. Because Siri has the best voices. But that's one of the things that stuck out to me was, apart from hierarchy, all you get is Machiavellianism.
Yeah. All that there is sheer power if you don't have hierarchy in terms of some nature designed to have people above and people, or things above and things below, where you can have rightful rule for the sake of the thing ruled, or the person ruled, or whatever it is. And then you could, and I mean, even saying it out loud feels awkward.
Yeah, right. I know. Because I think I've realized this when I was reading the Westminster Confession of Faith, the larger catechism, on, what was it? The Fifth Commandment. So it goes in the Fifth Commandment and starts laying out basically hierarchy, but it says superiors, inferiors, and equals, right? And as soon as I heard superiors, I was like, oh man, who's superior? Like, and who's the inferior? All right, and I just immediately recoiled against the language, because I'm in such an egalitarian world that having anybody over the top of you sounds horrible. Right.
What's funny is, because I got this book back when it's back in print. So, but I got it maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, before it was in print. And so it's somebody else's notes. And there's literally on the side of that passage, somebody just underlined it and said, "Oh, really? Question mark, question mark, question mark." So whoever I bought this book from, I got it at a used store. It was, they were insulted by saying, and it's talking about Aristotle, right? It's saying Aristotle's view is this. And then it gives it actually tweaks Aristotle. He says that Aristotle's view is not scriptural. Here's the actual view of the scriptures, right? That it's not just a simple superiority to inferiority by nature, which is Aristotle's argument. That there is actually where the person at the top is automatically better, and if they're not, they should be overthrown. So
that's Aristotle's view.
That's Aristotle's view. There's a natural, by nature, some people should rule others, and so there's a natural slave class and a natural ruling class. There's men are by nature superior to women, therefore men should rule over women, right? That it's a by nature, and that's the equation of the economic view of mankind and the ontological view, so that the nature is the reason, the thing that gives us the right to rule, rather than, and that, which is not, it's hierarchical, but it is not a scriptural view of hierarchy.
I feel that we're running into that right now.
Yeah, that's becoming, you have people arguing for it again, right? You've got the things swinging back in the other direction. And
like
even
guys like Andrew Tate fall right into that.
That's exactly what I was thinking of, right? Is if I can make more money than you, then I'm better than you. If I can convince some woman to come sleep with me, or a bunch of women to come sleep with me, it's because I am I am superior, right? Because the definition of superior, according to evolution, is that my seed carries on more than the seed of somebody else, right? You're starting to see that argument again, because you're not just getting a return to Christianity without the gospel being preached. So feminism is and egalitarianism, is a move away from the gospel, but so is chauvinism.
So okay, I'm trying to, I really didn't know where to, this is so there's so much here. I really didn't know how to drop into this. Is there anything that you wanted to bring out first? Because since we're here, I kind of wanted to read this part that really captured me and kind of work from there. But it seems like, Jason, so the more I read this book, I'm almost done with it, but the more I read this from Lewis, the more I realize, oh my goodness, we do not know how to read poetry. Like, I keep saying that, but when he says, okay, you got Paradise Lost and you need a preface to it to read it, he's teaching you the foundations of language and literature and poetry. And there's 6 more books for that he goes through in here that I realize I need to read that I haven't read, right? Yeah. All the homework writings, right? I'm realizing like, oh man, I would have never. So then when you pick up somebody like Paradise Lost, Milton's in conversation with folks that you don't even know exist yet if you haven't read some of these other authors, right? If you haven't read Iliad, if you haven't read Homer's stuff, if you have,
what Milton does, and if you're willing to put in the time, there's an entire classical education in Paradise Lost, right? Because what he does is he takes the classical world, the literature of the classical world. He takes the church fathers, the theology of the church fathers. He takes the scriptures, the stories and laws and poetry of the scriptures, and he weaves it together with the English history of poetry, right? And so he takes these 4 strands and he just begins, weaving them all until you get really, I think, the greatest English epic that there ever was. Although, I mean, I think Beowulf gives it a run for its money, but Beowulf is simpler, right? Beowulf is an epic just in the English tradition. Milton takes that English tradition and weaves it together with the Greco-Roman tradition, the Hebraic tradition of the scriptures, and the theologians of the church fathers. Because he is, I mean, by the time he's finished with he's literally read every book in print in England. I mean, he was quite a fellow.
Really?
And he was also blind, which, Homer was blind. Ugh. And so I think God had his story is incredible. He has a great sonnet that he wrote as he went blind. He was losing his eyesight, and he thought he was going to spend his days as in politics because he wanted to do something important. He wanted to restore.
I remember you telling me about that.
Yeah. He wanted to restore political freedom, the freedoms of an Englishman, and he wanted to restore the education of a free man to the English people. Right. So they were liberal arts education was waning, and he wanted to restore it. And because he wanted freedom for the English people. And then he went blind and he couldn't do it. He didn't get to finish his task. And he writes this incredible sonnet called on my blindness, or on his blindness, I think, because it was just a numbered sonnet, but it's the best of his sonnets, in my opinion. And saying, Lord, I don't get it. What am I doing here? I had a plan. I thought it was from you. I was trying to use my gifts to serve you, and then you took away my eyesight, and I can't do it anymore. And here I am, just stuck in a library, reading all day, writing poetry, useless. He says, but those who travel across the seas for their king are serving just as much as those who are standing in wait when they've been told to wait. So here I am. And then he writes the most influential poem in the English language that literally people all around the world, the poets of the rest of the world in every language, if they want to study English poetry, they go to Milton. If they want to study, there's translations of it. So because it's just a poem, quote unquote, just a poem, it's made it to all sorts of corners of the world where the Bible isn't allowed throughout history. So it's similar to Bach, where you can go to the center of communist China and some place where the Bible's not allowed, and they're teaching Bach to the kids. And then they say, oh, look at this. What's with I remember talking to a woman at the university who came over to study music, and she couldn't wait to go to church because she thought she would hear Bach.
Wow.
And then she walked in and she was like, this isn't what I expected. In China, we thought the Christian music was Bach, and I couldn't wait to go hear it in its context, and nobody's singing it. So
when you I don't want to change too much, but when you think about do you think that actually has an effect on the society? So I can hear a lot of my Christian friends saying that's great that you guys are playing Bach, but there's no gospel there. So it's not, what's the effect of having good literature there that might be joyful, but with no gospel? It doesn't have any effect on society, really, does it?
I mean, a couple of things. One, if they listen to their music and then they listen to church music and they say, oh man, the church music that's the greatest stuff ever made, then even if it's not them, that will change their children's relationship to or expectations or relationship to the church, right? So when you get when it's objectively true that the greatest music in the history of the world was produced by Christians to be sung in church, right? You don't find I've talked with atheists about this, and sometimes they have to either say, well, there's no objective beauty's not objective, right? But a lot of them, they'll say, well, yeah, that's true, but if it weren't for Christianity, you would have gotten it a different way, right?
It was still going to come one way or the other.
because it's the natural evolution of music that's happening, right? That is just that's an argument that artistic development is guided by something else,
right?
But it's obvious that it has to be guided to produce something that beautiful. So you've got that combined with the fact that, so if somebody that experiences that great music, it does make them less likely to be able to make sense of, say, persecution, right? And their children are, we've got to think generationally as well. If you're raised, my wife and I, when we were first married, we did evangelistic work in the town that has the highest alcoholism and child abuse rate west of the Mississippi. Right? So about 900 people, there's 11 bars, and literally every kid was abused that we minister to. There were bike racks on the bars because so many driver's licenses had been permanently revoked. I'd never been any place like it. We would be doing our evangelism, just pizza after high school, and do Bible study, and we'd have people come, and we would just had a huge stack of Bibles, send them home. We had one guy came back, brought the Bible back, and said, before I even got to my house, my grandmother came out screaming, "What's in your bag? What's in your bag? What's in your bag?" She made me take it out, leave it outside, and couldn't bring it in. So obviously grandma was possessed by demons. Really? She could sense the Bible coming and was told that she would be tortured if she let that into the house. So he brought it back, and he wanted to leave it. And we said, well, let's just pray instead. Father in heaven, we pray that this Bible is not able to be sensed by the demons, and he can keep it. And then he just kept it in his bag. And
you have some of the weirdest stories I've ever heard.
I know, just weird stories. But what's so interesting is that when you're ministering in a place like that, you have to think generationally, right? There is no way to just pull the plug on that, right? And so that church, the most effective evangelist in that church was the local cocaine dealer, who had gotten it into his head somewhere that the Presbyterian pastor gave really good marriage advice. And so when people buying cocaine from him confessed their marriage problems, he would say, "Hey, go up to the Presbyterian church. They do free marriage counseling there, and the pastor's really good."
Here goes your cocaine.
The pastor never had met the cocaine dealer or anything, but he was the local coke dealer. He would just send people. So the pastor these people would walk in, they'd say, "Hey, so-and-so sent us." And he's like, "So first off, I know you're on coke,
right? Because
your coke dealer sent you. That's how bad your marriage has gotten. Your coke dealer even is worried about you." And so he's sending you to the Presbyterian church, right? So, so we had multiple deacons. A lot of our music team from that church, that's how they had come to the Lord, is the coke dealers got so worried about them that he sent them to church, right? So, and the parents were all abused as kids. They weren't good parents. They weren't abusive parents, though, right? That was the difference. They didn't have, they weren't super consistent. They didn't have, they would pray with their kids, and they wouldn't beat their kids. And everybody said, "Oh my gosh, what a community. I've never seen anything like that." Right? Look, the way that those kids are not beat. You're thinking generationally, or you give up and you leave, right? So, just just the goal is that the kids that grow up here have a safe place to grow up, and will educate them in the scriptures. Mom and dad come to the Lord late, doing their best, but it's sanctification is a slow process, but it's a generational process. So, I think that's good news. And often as parents, it's hard good news to hear, to say, well, our goal is to just keep growing.
So
just keep cleaning the house. I mean, metaphorically speaking, by picking up whatever you find in front of you. And over the course of my life, I don't have to get it all together right now, because I can't. It's not going to work that way. But if I'm growing, then my kids will grow along with me, and then they'll outgrow me, and that's the goal. And then their kids, they raise kids while they continue to grow, and their kids outgrow them. There's not we don't have a werewolf problem, so there's not a silver bullet. You have to just dig in and grow through history.
I think you said that before, and I didn't write it down. I'm gonna write it down now. We don't have a werewolf problem, so there's no silver bullet. But I think everybody keeps wanting a silver bullet. But okay, so then make this tie into though the connection between that and a nation getting something that's not the gospel, but it has the beauty of tradition of kind of the culture that then is it transformable without the gospel? How does that work?
I think though the gospel is what brings the transformation, but what we don't, the way in to the New Jerusalem is 12 pearls facing every direction that have been carved into gates. We like to think the gate we came through is the only gate in, but there's the way to discover the good news is out of our control, right? So our job is to just beautify it as best we can, love it as best we can. And when we come across, so like this woman, that the reason that she wanted to get to college in America was because growing up studying Bach, one of the things that she learned along the way was that he wrote Sola Dea Gloria on the bottom of each manuscript when he finished it, right? This is for the glory of God. And she said, well, I want to meet this God. I gotta make it to America, because a God that can inspire this is a God that I would like to encounter. Now, she doesn't have a totalizing understanding of God yet, because she's got an understanding, a Taoist understanding of the gods, but there's this one over there that I need to meet, right? That the God over there that speaks English. Now, what's so interesting about that is, Bach's German, but he's known through the English education, because we believe in the Holy Catholic Church, right? The small C universal church. And so she gets here, and the first Sunday goes to the closest church she can. So there is, and then, one of the things that happens is, throughout history, a good example of this, I think, is St. Patrick. Is the reason we even know St. Patrick is because he was captured while fishing and made into a slave. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, he tells us, I would have just gone along. He was a Christian. He was raised in a Christian home, and he's like, but I was just kind of a mediocre Christian. Nothing had ever put pressure on my faith. Being dragged off as a slave put the kind of pressure on my faith, put the kind of pressure on his faith that turned it into an incredibly powerful faith. So he's dragged to to the Irish. He's enslaved by them. He escapes, makes it back, and he says, "Where I need a seminary education so I can get back to those people with the gospel." And so he digs in. He gets himself the education that he needs, the theological education that he needs, and then he and a couple of other men get back on a boat, head back, and bring the gospel to them. The way that God decides to bring the gospel to a people isn't up to us. We just know that it's going to happen, right? That he's going to bring it to every people, and whatever doorway is the one that the Spirit kicks open is the doorway we walk through. So,
as you were talking, you were speaking earlier about the beauty and the attraction because of the beauty. And all I could think about was when God gave Israel the law, one of the things that was going to be done was he said, hey, they would look at the law, look at how ordered you are, and say, what kind of God is it that would give this nation such great laws, right? And that in itself was an attraction to, like, this is ordered. People get along. There's justice here. There's love here. What is going on in this relationship that's happening? What kind of God is that?
Think of the way the church is growing so much in India right now, right? That's because of the English people bringing them English common law. Right?
David Fowler just lost his mind right now. David Fowler's like, yes, talk about it. Common law.
Were there problems with it?
Sure.
The way they did it? Yeah. And they did it, but they did it better in India than they did amongst the Congolese, for example. That was a disaster. But in England, they really thought, or they understood that part of the reason that God had given them the British Empire was so that they could bring the light of the gospel. And they did it more effectively in some places, less effectively in other places. You look at the American colonies, the relationship between the colonies and the different tribes of the different colonies and different tribes of the natives that were different, and some were good, some were bad, but the understanding was there that part of what you are supposed to do is bring the light of the gospel with you. And some of that means bringing order. If an area, let's say a village, is requiring that a woman kill herself because her husband died, the law should step in and defend that woman. You must not actually kill yourself. You're not allowed. You don't get to murder yourself. That's against the law. The pressure that the village is putting on you to do that is wrong and it needs to be stopped. Those sorts of, coming to South America and finding was it Cortez? He found the empire. I think it was the Aztecs, but I'm not positive. He found that they were raising people for human sacrifice. Mm-hmm. They were literally raising slaves for human sacrifice, and he stopped it. He went in with swords. He went up to the top. He cut the idol in half that was requiring the sacrifices. He actually rolled the idol into the pile where they would throw the dead bodies after they would pull the heart out. He cut the idol in half, threw it down there, and said, your creator has sent his son to die for you, so he no longer requires any sons from you. Right? No more human sacrifice. That's good news to the slaves. Now, it's bad news to the tyrants, but that's good news to the slaves, right? Because all of a sudden they're freed from a certain fate of certain death. So the law coming in is good news when it's just biblical, righteous law.
So was that Cortez?
Cortez, yeah. There's a great book called Cortez, Conqueror for Christ.
Don't you do it. Don't you give me no other books. Don't you even do it.
I won't tell you about it, though.
Oh, Jason. All right, Cortez Conquer for Christ. I'm gonna go get it.
It's a biography. When I was in elementary school, I wanted to be an explorer, and then
Reaper-Cheap.
Reaper-Cheap was my hero, right? So, and then somewhere along the way, somebody said, "Oh, we already finished that. Everything's been explored."
Right.
And I was super bummed, and I look back now and I've thought, man, somebody's flat imagination just crushed my little boy imagination.
Yeah.
And so but that's one of the reasons I think I got really into fantasy, was because then you could actually have stories about explorers. So like I read a ton on Columbus. I was a big Columbus nerd, and every year when Columbus Day comes around, I'm ready to celebrate because the man was wonderful.
Racist.
And he wasn't perfect, but he was a wonderful man, and he was very protective of the natives. He begged the crown to send people to protect them. He said we are so far technologically advanced over them that they are going to be taken advantage of. Send somebody that their entire job is to protect these people. And he was right. They got taken advantage of because of the technological inferiority. He said, it's our Christian duty to protect these people until they have caught up to us technologically, until we can bring them along and bring them into society. And it didn't happen. But that was Columbus that was saying that. So the fact that he gets accused of what he gets accused of,
it's because there's a play on him. So let's say that you're Cortez right now. You had to come over to America, and you were like, okay, here's the idol that I got to get to chop down. Well, what would that be? Like, if you had to strategically, like, what's the idol you get to chop down?
I mean, if you were to go, I mean, you've got the bull on Wall Street. That might be a good. Like I think we've got a couple, but I think one of them is we think that we are safe because we're wealthy. And so I think we trust in our wealth as a nation a lot. I don't listen to NPR much anymore, but I used to have a drive, I worked out in the rural area, and the only radio station you could get was NPR. And so I would listen to that show, All Things Considered, on the way.
Yeah.
And all they ever talk about is politics and economics. And they're like, all things considered, politics and economics. And that's the sum of all things in that particular view of the world. And whether you're on the left or on the right, I do think that we trust in wealth rather than we trust in our money a lot. So I think that would be, there's a giant golden calf on at the end of Wall Street that might be worth cutting down.
Interesting. Yeah.
I think that,
yeah. Well, I know,
because an idol is anything we trust in for provision, protection, and identity. So
provision, protection, identity. I think you're right. That wouldn't have been the thing I was trying to figure out what I would go after. I was trying to figure out where is the most amount of egalitarian, like where do you find it at the most?
Yeah. But that's a harder one, because I think that's an individual identity spot. And where do you go with it's self-worship more than so we turn ourselves into idols. Our self-actualization,
but I think you hit it at the money, though.
Identification.
I think when you go to that bull, all of a sudden, my
wife always says, yeah, we could use a good depression, because man, all the trans folks would go away in an instant if we were poorer.
Your wife might be right about that,
because she we grew up. That's what being.
You're right about
wealthy
that.
Without Christ looks like. Yeah.
I always say is like, I guess I said, I guess black folks doing all right. Because anytime I start seeing us having what I call white folks problems, really the problems with people with money, people who got money. I'm like, whenever you got those kind of problems, and I start seeing with black folks and depression, it's like, we depressed. When? Like, you must be doing pretty good.
Like, depression's a rich person problem.
Yeah, you get to go to a doctor and talk to them. And it's like, I need to make sure my mental space. Great grandma and them didn't talk about stuff like that. They was too busy working.
Yeah, well, and it's because when you have money, you expect to find that there's a spot in the world for you, and then when you discover that the dislodgement from the world that comes with having money but no Jesus, that experience is called depression. I should fit someplace, and I don't feel like I do.
And why doesn't everybody know that I should fit the place?
Why doesn't it? Does it? Yeah. How do I work through that? And and so you hire a professional friend to talk to, because society is broken down so much. Normally, you just go talk to a guy while you shop pool, but we don't know how to be friends anymore. Our society is broken down to the point that you can't just go talk to somebody and say, "Man, I'm sad sometimes for no reason." And the other dude's like, have you tried lifting weights? Have you tried like calling me and we can go get a beer and watch some basketball? Like, there's ways to deal with that. Right. We don't have friends anymore, so we have to hire a professional friend called a counselor.
Oh, man. When you have, that's interesting, because I think that this plays into the conversation with hierarchy. When you have a hierarchy, there is a format in which you go about doing things. Like, so for instance, I was watching It's a Wonderful Life for Christmas. I think I talked about it a lot, but one of the things they hinted at in the film was, there's a problem, you go ask Dad, he would know, right? There was a system by which that you went to when you were having problems or issue with things. And on that, I don't know how to call it, scale, or on that degree of levels, maybe degree is the right way. You had a checkpoint to deal with the issues that were there, right? And even at the end, well, for instance, the store scene, the bank scene where they have the run on the banks, right? One of the things that he gets them to remember is that there is a hierarchy of economics here, that if you move it in such a way, the way that the guy who has all the money wants you to move it, it will collapse and foreclose. So he says, hey, we want our money, is what everybody's asking for in the bank. And he's like, well, hold on a second. Your money is in her house, and your other money is over there in his business. Remember, you invested in that, and it is in that person's house. And if you take your money, you're gonna foreclose on their houses, right? And so while there's a hierarchy, there's also a unity of support that's there.
Yeah, there's a community.
There's a community, yeah.
The hierarchy is personal.
Right. That's good.
It's not a bureaucracy.
We don't. Yeah.
So egalitarianism produces bureaucracy,
and that's what we think is a hierarchy, because it actually has levels in the bureaucracy, and we think, well, because you're higher up in the bureaucracy, you must be it's hierarchy. But that's actually Aristotle's position, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is. Well, his position is that by nature you've got superior people and inferior people, and that when the inferior people are on the top, then society collapses. You've got to have the superior people on the top and the inferior people on the bottom. It sounds
like politics right now.
I do think we're closer to Aristotle than we would want to admit, right? That there actually isn't a real view of the equality of all people,
right? I mean, and just just to jump in real quick. So right now, it's, if you don't have somebody who looks like you and talks like you and has been where you've been culturally, what's her name? Ayanna Presley said, we don't need black faces that don't have black voices. And we don't need We don't need black faces who don't speak for. We don't need black voices who don't speak for black faces or something like that. It was something. I gotta go find it now. But what she's basically saying is, if you're black and you don't speak for black people, then you shouldn't be in the position where you can talk for us. As if I have to be exactly identical to everything you are in order to be able to speak rightly for you, which is kind of the same. So if I'm not in position of power, right, then, or I don't have somebody like me in a position of power, then I actually can't be treated justly. Right.
Because there isn't a unity. There isn't a human unity.
Right. It's a marked identity from my skin color, my cultural background, and my shared experience with these people. So if I don't have that, then I can't speak for this group of people. Yeah.
Well, do you think that the assumption is that communication across cultural boundaries is just not possible? Like, can I not understand the experience of somebody that it didn't have the same experience as me?
Correct. I think that's part of it. Yeah, but I think it's also trying to say is you might be able in some sense to see, but you won't be able to really identify with. Right? Like, so yeah, I think that's part of it. But I think go ahead.
I mean, that just goes against all the history of human experience. I mean, at least against the history of the literary conversation of mankind.
That's what it was. I was making sure I was finding it right. So yeah, we don't need any more black faces that don't want to be a black voice.
What?
So
is it possible for a black person to not be a black voice? I mean, is she saying,
according to her,
only certain kinds of black people count as black people?
Right.
Or is she saying you're pretending to be something else? You're a black person inside, but on the face of it, you're pretending to be something else.
I think it's the other way around.
The other way around?
Yeah, you're a black face, but don't have a black culture. Right. So, I think it does get to Aristotle's position, closer to his position, which is, in order for, I have to have a representative identical to me in every way, right? In order for there to be true justice and representation in positions of power, right? So that we don't get ruled over by people who don't understand where we've come from, right? Or the experiences that we have. And so if we're not represented, then we don't get justice. We don't get a part of the pie. We get ruled out of the equation.
There's a couple of assumptions in there. One is that it's the limited pie problem.
Yep.
Right. So there's part of that. But I think the other thing is that it is that somebody's going to oppress somebody. That's just reality. There is no way for there to not, if there's any sort of hierarchy, then it's automatically oppression.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody functions like that. That's why people want Trump.
No, I think you're right. I think but I also think there's a, there's things I love about Chappelle as an artist, but when I've been listening to his podcast some, and one of the things that he brings up is that basically I think he would fall into the um, black supremacist
Oh yeah.
camp of, I don't know. There's not a term for it. I was trying to think of a term for it. But just that
Black nationalism, maybe.
Yeah, but it's not really nationalism. He probably is a black nationalist, but I'm thinking more in terms of like anthropologically. He will say, well, but black people would never do that. That's a white people thing. Black people don't. What he said something along the lines of, well, black people don't. It was even like real black people, because you have to separate at that point.
Yeah, right.
And because of the melanin, they don't suffer from, I can't remember which vice it was.
Oh yeah, I've heard stuff like that.
You hear stuff like that, and you think that's not true,
right?
People are people.
Yeah,
people suffer from vices. People
because they're all connected to Adam.
Right. There's not a physical differentiator that you can say, well, these people don't suffer from this temptation because of that or this. But
I will say though, there are some things that some suffer from different than others, right? So
but there are ways you were raised. There are
Cretans, right?
Being in certain neighborhoods versus other neighborhoods, you're going to have different expectations, but that's because of the way that the way our imaginations are formed. Tolkien talks about the influence that the landscape has on language, because he spoke like 19 languages, and he talks about how this language that was the same as this language till these people moved to the ocean instead of the mountains, and then the mountains caused their language to take on this shape, and then when they went down and they started getting in boats and going out to the ocean, the language changed because of the influence that the landscape has on the imagination of the speaker, right? So, and it's that way with everything, right? So kids, but I've got the guys that grew up in my neighborhood that we used to hang out and go out to the woods together and build forts, and whenever we get together, there's an immediate camaraderie because of our neighborhood. Our imagination was formed by the same streets, experiences, sleepovers, midnight games of kick the can, and it's immediate. It takes about a second and a half to be back into camaraderie mode with any of those guys.
Did you say midnight games of kick the can?
Kick the can, yeah. We said that was one of the big games we played here. All the kids in the neighborhood, like in the summers, because we're in a neighborhood, there aren't really, at least in Spokane, we don't have this anymore, but the houses that go up with unfinished basements and they're partially done so that a young family can get a house and then work on the house and improve their lot. I was born into one of those neighborhoods. So every family was a young family with an unfinished basement, and because you can move in and then you finish the basement over the course of raising your kids, and then you can sell that house because it's worth more. So we used to go out in the mornings in the summer and sit on the curb until we had enough people to go do something. Then we'd go out and gather up a bucket full of frogs. We were in the suburbs, but we're close enough to the woods that there was creeks and streams and ponds, and or we'd go get tools and we'd go out to the woods and we would hammer together wood until we had a little house. Or we went one summer, we spent the entire summer digging a giant hole in the I still don't really understand why, but for hours we would just dig. Right. And that and then when the sun would go down, we'd have to come back to the neighborhood, but then all the parents would be sitting out there, drinking beer and chatting and having fun, and we would play kick the can until you literally just collapsed. it was an amazing neighborhood to grow up in. All of those people, when I run into them, we have immediate camaraderie,
right?
Because we have the same ideal imaginatively. We want to give that to our kids, and it's hard now. You don't have the same sort of neighborhoods, at least here in Spokane. You don't have the same sort of safe neighborhoods. Like our dads used to just park cars blocking the ends of the road so that no cars would come down it, so that the kids could play safely. And I don't think you're allowed to do that anymore.
Nah.
We're just like, we'll just put 2 cars at the end of each road, and then you've got a safe road for the kids to play kick the can in the middle of the night. And that's what summer nights were like.
I shouldn't ask this question, but I just have to know, and you can just quit. How do you win at kick the can?
By kicking the can. The one that kicks the can wins.
Yeah, got it.
You not play the kick the can growing up?
Nah, man, we had balls, bro. We kicked the ball.
There was a big coffee can. Our neighbor had this big coffee can. We'd put, and maybe this isn't a real game. I don't know. Maybe somebody just made it up. One of our parents was like, "Get out of our hair. I'm going to teach you a game. It's called Kick This Can." And so we put our neighbor would put a big can in the middle of the street. And then 2 people were and they had to guard the can. And if you got tagged, then you went to jail. And you were all trying to kick the can, and so whoever got to kick the can got to be it next. Okay. I don't know. Maybe that was a made-up game just in our neighborhood. It was super fun.
Yeah, sounds interesting.
20 elementary school kids. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, you were saying.
We also played. We played a lot of street hockey. We played a lot of we played basketball, we played stickball, baseball, all sorts of other stuff too. Kickball, we actually played a lot of kickball. But the whole point being that the way we're raised has a really powerful influence on our imagination. And that's really, I think, the difference when we say culture. What we're really talking about is just the imaginative categories that we interpret the world through. Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know.
So the reason I brought that up is because I just think that we were talking about with hierarchy, the way that this kind of plays into, just going back to what got us here. I can't remember. I brought up Ayanna Pressley because of the fact of, I think that there's this power struggle for position in this bureaucracy that has a fake hierarchy. And I think it lends itself to what Aristotle was talking about, at least in the part of the book that right before this, that there is this, some people must be ruled over. I think everybody believes Aristotelian view of this, but and so what they're fighting for is, well, if that's the way things are set up in this bureaucracy, what would you call it? A bureaucratic hierarchy.
Bureaucratic Gnosticism, I think. Is what it is. Okay.
Then you can't rule over me because you don't have the knowledge to understand what it is we know about us. So then I have to be able to rule. Or somebody from us has to be able to rule over us. Yeah. So it's still the same thing.
Because they've got the knowledge of what it's like to be me.
That's exactly.
And you know what? They are not. So they're not better than me the way you think you are.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Which completely. It's so egalitarian. It's ridiculous. So I want to get. So you were saying something about that, but that's why I think our politics really is closer to an Aristotle perspective of this, because it's all power. And so Lewis, I just want to read this line. Lewis says, "If you take degree away, each thing meets in mere pugency." That's what I was looking for last time. In mere pugency, which is like fight, right? Strength fighting against each other. Yeah. Strength will. Do you want the place?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just.
It was right after. So the paragraph which says Aristotle was thinking mainly of civil society.
Okay, got it.
Paragraph. After that paragraph, the paragraph below it is where halfway through that.
Okay, got it.
Okay. If you take degree away, each thing meets in mere appugency. Strength will be the Lord. Everything will include itself in power. That right there was like, ooh, that's exactly where we're at. In other words, the modern idea that we can choose between hierarchy and equality is for Shakespeare Ulysses mere moonshine. The real alternative is tyranny. If you will not have if you not have authority, you will find yourself obeying brute force.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where it's like all of our systems are we have. Can you think of a system right now outside of even our marriages are almost that way?
Becoming more and more so, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, which is why I think we have so much divorce. Because when you remove hierarchy and just maybe define hierarchy. What would be your, because I don't think he actually goes through and defines hierarchy so much. Well, he does. It's later in here. But he says the order of love, the order of things, the natural, well, what did he say? The created order of things or the natural order of things?
Well, no, it's the, so instead of ordered according to nature, it's ordered according to authority, right? So you can have equals, but one of them equals in nature, but one of them has authority over the other by the voluntary submission of one to the other, right? So hierarchy is the way that he's using it here, it's a matter of voluntary submission to rightful authority by equals. Right. So instead of it being by nature, one is above the other, you have I think if we just got to get more specific. So in a marriage, you have a woman submitting to her husband, a wife submitting to her husband, is what creates the hierarchy. It's not that men by nature are superior to women. It's an economic distinction in which the obedience is a gift, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So the covenant agreement is based off of her is united by her saying, "I will choose to submit to you."
Yeah.
And him.
So so the hierarchy is created by vows, not created by nature.
Interesting. Right. Okay.
Right. So it's the same in a civil magistrate with in a Christian understanding.
Right.
The hierarchy is created by vows, by covenant. Right. We still do this. Right.
We still do this, but we still think that the person who is in a badge is somehow greater than the other person who's not.
I do think. Well, so we live. I think we are living in a transition. So you've got you've got a mix, right? So you do have you've got there's a funny sequence in the movie Wayne's World where this group of 20-year-old white guys that literally are like living in their parents' basement, they pull up to a restaurant and there's a police officer there and they start cracking jokes about, "Oh, I smell bacon. Does anybody smell bacon?" And then the cop gets it and he's like, "Oh, okay, funny, very funny guys," right? That there's like this, but they're making fun of the fact that these guys are like tough on authority, but they all live in the basement of their parents' house still, right? It's like a funny juxtaposition where you can't see the irony. They can't see the irony of it. And that's kind of the running gag throughout the whole movie is that they're like down with the man while living in their parents' basement and like being supported by their parents. They're like down with the man out in society. It's very funny. But that down with the man attitude, I think, is that a lot of kids are now just raised with a view of authority that they think they're better than me by putting on a badge. Society is saying they're better than me by giving them authority. I've got to get the power back for myself.
Right.
So, so there's different ways that we do that or whatever. And then I do think that there are areas where the cops act like that too. Yeah. Right. That the police act like, well, look, I'm in charge here. I can do whatever I want. And it's ugly. But you know, LA in the 90s was infamous for that. New Orleans police, Minnesota police there's been places where you've got these infamous police forces that act like that, you know. So it's a problem that goes both directions versus, but the reality is they take a vow. You know, the sheriff takes a vow, the president takes a vow. In fact, it was just a couple of installations ago. It was, I think it was Obama's first term where they had to go back and redo the vow because they had spoke during it.
I think Obama actually corrected the judge, what he was actually supposed to say live on the spot.
Yeah, but they had to start over.
Yeah,
because it's a legal vow that has to be done properly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So because he is because it's the vow that makes him president, right? It's the vow combined with the election of the electors, right? The electoral college. So our vote doesn't make a president. That's not how it works legally. The electoral college and the vow working together make him the president. Similar to it in marriage, the pledge, the vow, and the consummation make a family.
So then, just let me think through this a little bit. As you're saying, I see the hierarchy set up there, but then the way that you said that hierarchy, it is. Well, I wrote it down. A hierarchy is the creation of vows, right? Not
it's created by vows.
By vows, not by nature, right? So
correct.
then but isn't it in the woman's nature to be submissive to her husband?
I don't think you've met very many women.
Well, isn't that part of the curse though? And then part of the curse is that she fights that, but it's still there.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So is it the,
her whole
proper order?
Yeah, I mean that's what she was designed for, right?
Right.
I mean,
I see what you're. The proper order that brings out the greatest aspects of our nature is a husband as a covenant head and a wife as a covenant subject acting together in their roles, both imitating God, as the image of God, imitating God within their particular sphere. Each of them becomes more and more who they were created to be that way.
Right.
But Lewis makes the point. He makes the point in The Great Divorce that if we were to run into a woman who lived her life that way, dies and finds herself in her glorified body, even imperfectly, we would all bow down as if she were a goddess, right? Mm-hmm. because our experience is so marred by sin in this life that the glory that men and women were both intended to bear, the weight of it is such that if we were to run into somebody that was actually doing it, we would all want to bow down to them. We would be tempted to worship. But the women in particular are glory bearers.
Right.
Men are not. Yeah. Men are told to not hold on to glory, but to give it. Right. And they're given a wife so that by the rule and reign of a husband, a wife should receive glory and honor and be lifted up, right? Become who she's intended to be. And when you actually, I mean, we my wife and I have seen this a lot throughout our lives, is when people, they know my theology and they know, that like, oh, he's really into headship, which is true. I'm always trying to be better at it. So I am studying it regularly. I want to be a good covenant head. It's doesn't come naturally. And so I'm into it. And then people meet my wife and they're like, that's not what I expected.
Right. Yeah.
She's so confident. You could put her up against most pastors in terms of Bible knowledge, theology knowledge, confidence in what the scriptures teach. Right. And I've seen it where has no problem, she's talking to some pastor and being like, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible says this. What's wrong? What are you talking about? Right. And they're like, why is she so confident? I wouldn't expect her to be so spicy and confident. And right. Because you're into headship. We think, well, that's the whole point of headship, is for her to be safe and confident and know who she is and be able to gratefully enjoy that, being who she is, and not have to, she doesn't have to work to be loved and work to be in theory, that's the whole idea, is that she's safe, confident, and knows how to be who she is well. And that's intimidating to most men. Most men are terrified of a confident woman. But a confident woman comes from being safe, well-loved, and protected. And then most men run the other direction from that. So, because they're weak. No, well, I just want to make sure I make the point. It's because they're weak,
right? And weak men create weak women, right? Like, that's a problem. Strong men make strong women but so what am I mixing up nature and order? Because when I say, like, isn't it in her nature to submit to her husband?
Well, there's a technical use of the word nature.
Okay.
That has to do with metaphysics, right? So by nature, she is as much the image of God. Right? She is an equal. Right. So there's the ontological nature of a man and a woman is all equal.
Right.
The economic assignment, the economic placement of men and women is, it's not men and women. The economic placement of husbands and wives.
Right. Offices.
The offices is where the hierarchy exists. And this is where, you start having problems in this when you start thinking that women are supposed to submit to men.
Right.
But it's actually, it's why a wife is supposed to submit to her husband.
Yeah.
Right. It's not women. It's not a women and men thing. It's an office holding thing. So
interesting.
A wife is freed. in marriage, by submitting to her husband, she actually is supposed to not submit to all the other men and their right. So she's freed from the tyranny of all men's
other men
expectations, right? Yeah. So,
well, and that does that follow then too? Until she's finds her husband, then a girl and her father, right? That's who her submission. So the hierarchy is established all through the relationships of people, just in different points, right? So then,
right, and as a woman, as a young woman comes of age and goes out into the world, that her relationship with her dad shifts and changes. It's not the same between a 9-year-old and her dad and a 29-year-old and her dad, obviously, because a woman can be the legal head of her household as a single woman, and that's all. But the protection of a dad who loves her and protects her and cares about her and knows her, all of that is, it remains even if the legal relationship shifts and changes over time. And
so how? Oh, I don't know. Okay, keep going. I want to keep going on the hierarchy.
So I think that's maybe a good way to think of it, though, is that the relationship between offices we hold does not affect our metaphysical, our ontological relationships, the relationships of our being and our nature. And that's the difference between hierarchy and tyranny. Right? A tyrant believes they can do whatever they want as long as they've got the power to do it and they're justified. In a hierarchy, a husband knows that Jesus is the husband of husbands and that his job is to imitate Christ, is to image Christ into the relationship as a husband. A wife's job is also to image Christ into the relationship as a subject.
You were talking about this last time.
Yeah. So because when we're told that we're made in the image of God in Genesis 1 and 2, it's in the context of Adam and Eve being a family, right? Adam is the image of God. Eve is the image of God. Adam and Eve together are also the image of God. So the other job of a family is to reflect the triune nature of God into the world. Most Christians don't even know what the triune nature of God would mean, right? So they don't. So if you said, well, what was God like before he created? I don't know. We don't talk about that, right? we don't talk about the Trinity. We don't talk about the triune nature of God. We don't talk about the eternal community of self-giving love that has always existed. We don't talk about the eternal relationship of the Father and the Son and the Spirit, the eternal procession, the eternal sonship of Christ, right? That Jesus, that as the second person of the Trinity, he is co-equal with the Father and the Spirit. They're all fully God, and yet he has submitted as the Son from all eternity, right? And the Father has lived his life for the benefit of the Son for all eternity because he is the head of the Son, right? Because he is the Father of the Son. He has lived his life of self-giving love from all eternity, and that he created us to live in families because we are his image. He loves being a father, and so he made us to be able to be fathers, to experience what he has loved doing from all eternity. And that's why Paul says that if in Ephesians that every father takes his name from the Father in heaven, right? We are called fathers because God has always been a father and has always had a son, and that our kids should be able to rejoice in being kids because Jesus has been the Son of the Father from all eternity. And that's a blessed relationship. The parent-child relationship is a blessing, right? We don't dig back into who we are and what we're for very often, and so we end up with weird civic theology,
or just straight power struggles.
Power struggles. We assume a Machiavellianism. God is in charge because he's the biggest and the strongest, right? And if we could overthrow him, then we could be in charge. And that's Zeus with the Titans. That's different. All forms of paganism are some sort of Machiavellian power struggle in eternity that then just comes to reflect itself. And then people, in the Greek mindset, people were created because the gods got tired of growing their own food.
Right.
So they're like, we need some slaves. So they created people. We're natural slaves because we're inferior. And then the story as the story goes on, then we overthrow the gods too, usually in the mythologies of the ancient world. And that's how we become the ones in charge, right? So I think there's always, and I think that's just Darwinian evolution all over, that our Darwinian evolution is just a return to that. So the desire to restore hierarchy and order is a desire to reflect God well. The end of Colossians 1 says the mystery that was hidden has been revealed in Christ. And then in Colossians 2:3, it says, so therefore we have come to reflect God and the Father and the Son, right? God the Spirit and the Father and the Son, the triune nature of our that we are intended to reflect, that is a unity of love, a unity of order, a unity of hierarchical self-giving fellowship. We are restored to that in Christ when Paul says, I pray that you would become fruitful again, like you were intended to be in the garden before you ate the fruit. And that's what he's talking about. And so when he gets to Colossians 2:4, he can say, so I rejoice in your faith and in your order, right? Your orderliness, the orderliness of your community. We think that sounds like a curse.
Right.
An orderly community. Why would we want that? Well, it's because we're not thinking in the terms of triune, self-giving.
If we only knew what order was,
fellowship of love.
I think
right. I think you're absolutely right. Right. I mean, how much? I mean, think of Mary Poppins. She's the hero because she brings disorder to a family that was well ordered up until that point, right? The way we tell stories is very often the one who brings disorder is the blessing, right?
Because it frees me from the hierarchy.
Frees me from the hierarchy, yeah. So but she's a witch, so that's what witches do.
So then, oh man, all right. I know you got to run, but so as you were talking, all I could think about was, okay, so you got hierarchy is made by covenant or through vows, right? By vows, right? That's what you said, right? Not by created order, right?
Yeah, right. Not by, well, it's not by, not by,
nature. What was it?
Nature.
Yeah. Okay.
They're not created by nature.
When we say nature, we're talking about the ontological realities, right?
The ontological realities. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's we enter into covenants.
Right. So then
the covenants are generational.
Sure.
But we as people, we enter into them. So my ancestors entered into the American covenant, and so I'm born into it.
Right. So then when you see something, did you watch Super Bowl?
No.
It's weird.
I know it is.
Okay,
totally
so
weird.
right at the opening, right after, by the way, you need to go watch the national anthem, Stapleton. Killed it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, killed it. Anyway, it was one of the best probably since Whitney Houston. But anyway, right after he got done, and the home of the brave, there was a flyover from the pilots, and all the pilots were women pilots that flew over. And I was like, oh, wow, look at that. That's so great. That's so awesome. And at the bottom of the text, all women pilots fly over. And I was like, oh, man, what a way to destroy the whole. Like, we were doing so good.
The purpose being what? Why would they want to say, what do they think they're trying to accomplish?
I think they're trying to, well, my thought was that they want to say, look, equality for women. That they can now be able to be fighter pilots, where before they weren't allowed to be fighter pilots. And so now we have equality for women, and the old barriers that used to hold women back are now gone, even all the way up to fighter pilots.
Fighter pilot, yeah.
And so, and I see that, and I'm like, you know, if it was my daughter and I had an airplane, would I want her to be able to learn how to fly it? Absolutely. Like I would love, like, it'd be really cool. My daughter to have a plane and a jet. She can fly a jet. It's
not the ability to fly a jet that's the issue.
I don't think so. No, not at all. Because I want her to be able to know how to shoot a gun. She's a great shot. You know, I want her to be able to learn how to do all those things. So it's not the issue, but it was an idea of an order of how we value. This is what I was trying to get at earlier. Like, how we value women in society matters. And so there is like, while I'm not trying to, there is no, I don't know if there's a vow that's there in some way outside of, this is my daughter and this is who she is, but I don't want her in a fighter pilot jet to go fight for America.
Well, but I think it's because when Paul talks about how there's different creatures have different glories.
Yeah, right.
Feminine glory and masculine glory are different.
Different glories, absolutely.
Different glories. And so if you said, hey, man, this guy, he's a great soldier. He killed hundreds of the enemy. You say, man, praise be to God.
Right.
That's glorious for a man to do. If you say to a woman, you say, man, this woman, she killed hundreds. We say, that's not what I want for her.
Right.
That's not right. If you say, you know, this woman has raised up and educated all these children. It's amazing. You know, that's wonderful. Then we say, oh, that's glorious. You know, that's beautiful. She has, her children have risen up and calling her blessed. And you say, oh, that's wonderful. That's glorious. There's all sorts of things that we should be able to glorify in the things that only women can do. She birthed babies, right. A man can't do that, but there's not respect for that like there used to be. I mean, now if a woman says, when I grow up I want to be a mom, you say, only a mom?
Yeah.
You know, that's what society tells her. Well, we need to fight back against that in a significant way. So
is the problem there hierarchy or glory?
Well, I think that when we talk about equality in nature, the equality of nature, that's not that there aren't distinctions, but the distinctions are in what kind of vessel they are to carry for glory, which glory vessel they are. A man and a woman have different glory vessels, and I think that they're vessels for different kinds of glory.
That's a metaphysical question.
What are they and what are they for? That's the question of metaphysics that we don't go and answer. And so we say, well, we know that they're equal ontologically. They're of equal worth, but they're for different things. And we need to be able to glory in that in a way that we don't really glory in right now. That's how we make hierarchy beautiful.
So there is a different, you know, well, we don't have time to talk about it. We'll have to talk about it. But yeah, I know you got to run to another meeting. I just want to get into the idea of metaphysics and hierarchy and fellowship. Like, what is that? Because I think sometimes when people will see what happened with the whole flight thing and the women in the airplanes, they'll have a different breakdown of it that is probably not as accurate, but they're getting at something still. You know what I mean?
Right.
So anyway, I know you got to run to another meeting.
All right. See you soon.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
All right. Bye.